This is the venerable Spacework Gobsmasher. It's a vehicle that came out of the very earlier days of the game, before I'd started, somewhere in the early 90s. It is essentially a box on wheels with a gun. It's the simplest kind of vehicle you can make. It's had numerous incarnations in both first and second Epic. By the time I got into the game in second edition, I spotted it in a White Dwarf magazine. It came with instructions on how to build it, and then I had to go and track down a Datafax to learn how to use it. Now, for an Orc-made vehicle, it's actually on par with a Land Raider, or some of the Rhino-based tanks. In Epic, it was meant to be like a main battle tank, and like all other things in that scale, gun fodder. So I decided I would build one. My attempt was less than successful. So I built this thing back in 95 from the templates I found online. Well, I say online. It's 95. I have the rules around here somewhere. I wish I could find them. The templates were included in a White Dwarf, and I'm sure they were in at least one more book, because I remember seeing patterns for a Bone Breaker and a Spleen Ripper, and at least one other thing. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. I built this way back before I understood that you don't glue things on after you paint, which explains why the wheels, I glued them back on with hot glue out of frustration. That didn't work. However, because I never got rid of it, mostly because I thought I have to be able to do better than this. Right? There's got to be a do better. I at least have an idea of scale. So, grab this guy. Put his wheels kind of there. We have something that's on par, not the same size, but on par with a Rhino for length and a little wider than a Rhino for width. So it's come like this. Yeah. Right? So we have an idea of scale, right? Or, grab a little smaller than a Russ. Okay? Definitely, well, a Russ is probably closer to the size we're going to use. So what I've got here is a basic mock-up of rough length and width. If I grab our old guy here, facing the right way, they are similar in length. Definitely more rhino-sized than original, and a little bit wider. Trying to do this. Trying to do two things at once is not my forte. Not my forte at all. And a little bit wider, a little bit longer. So, as long as it comes out kind of between Rhino and Rust sized, we should be okay. Here you can see in most of the originals is either flat or slightly curved on the front, depending on how the individual made them. We're going to go with a curve using a basilisk front plate. It's going to come out flat from here, octagon out a bit, so we have room for two hatches on the front. That's going to angle down, because the more angles you can put on a scratch build, the less it looks like a scratch build. Right? Boxes are fairly obvious boxes, right? With minimal additional planning, this would look less boxy and more like something okay. These come down the sides. This line is where I'm going to cut them. The idea being that this is like an engine cowling at the back. This here has to be trimmed down, be about the same size as that. And so these hinges actually look like engine cowling. right? Like this part here could swing up. Wheel size, about that big, maybe a little smaller, don't know yet. I want to get that done. The size of the main vehicle will determine how big the wheels get to be. And after all this planning, there's really nothing left to do but start cutting plastic. So as always, start with a little bit of pre-planning, some measuring. To be honest, this is about the only thing on this build that actually turns out to be square. Bit of a spoiler alert there. And no matter how many tools I use, isn't really gonna matter. Now, we know how long it's gonna be. Gotta figure out how wide. We've got the engine, the front plate to figure that part out, which is gonna give us an absolute width. And from there, it's just geometry to finish cutting out the base. And like I said, it's again, spoiler alert, it's about the only thing on this entire build that actually turns out to be square. Most of the hull build was an awful lot of faffing about. It's been quite a while since I've scratch built anything, let alone I've barely built any models of any type. I kind of misunderstood my own plans and thought I was going to do the sides all in one shot. That dawned on me that wasn't going to happen. So I'd put the top and sides all kind of went together differently. An awful lot of pain in the butt fitting that front plate onto the sides. It's trying to make things fit. The engine cowling at the back, that went together a bit better. Awful lot of measuring. And if you are a purist in terms of the tool I use, look away now. Yes, those are scissors. So I got the hull together. It dawned on me I may have blown up the scale a bit more than I wanted to. But the hull came out with an interesting shape regardless. I wasn't sure how far apart I wanted the wheels. I had originally planned to run a set of hand grips up the side to get on. That idea doesn't get used. There was an awful lot of fooling around with the wheels, at which point I figured a good size, cut them out, essentially drilled holes in the hull to run a rod through. Now, there's no way that this thing would have any kind of actual steering in terms of like regular vehicle steering. I'm pretty sure Gobsmashers turn kind of like the way forklifts do, and that you just spin one set of wheels against the other, and it turns in place. I didn't like where the wheels were the first time. Picked them up, moved them around a bit until I finally came up with something I liked. This actually took a fair bit of decking around, for lack of a better term, until I finally found something that was suitable. It didn't look they were too far apart or too close together. Now, it looks a bit like a dork toy now, but once I got to that point, I could start detailing. And then detailing, and more detailing, and then even more goddamn detailing. Which gets us to where we are now. I applied an awful lot of tiny little bolts and rivets and some plates and details in the hopes of trying to make this thing look more like, an actual build than something that just kind of came together in an evening. This front plate and this aren't on yet. The gun is going to stick through here, but I'll be gluing it on from the back. That way I don't have to worry about painting any of the gubbins and stuff in there. Because of the amount of space I've got here, I'm going to have to build the engine, drop it on, potentially paint it first, and then drop that over top. Got some help from our friends, the Chaos Spiky Sprue. Plenty of nice big fat teeth. These bolts and rivets are from you can read that. Nuts and Bolts, Red Vehicle and Diorama. They come in these strips like this. You have to cut them off, and if you're lucky, you'll only lose about a third of them. I probably could have divvied this up into another plate or so. But the thing is that these wheels are going to cover that much. You're not going to see much in between the wheel and the hull, so I'm not too concerned with detail in here. I think it came out fairly well. The ladder idea did get used. Get back here, you. The boys just get to climb right up the front, pop the cap, hop in. There's going to be a guy from the Battle Wagon box. He's going to sit here, and he's got a hunched over with a pair of binoculars like that. A little bit of, kind of like, what's his name from Fury. He'll be pointing out the front. Going to be kind of pointing off to the side. I still have to figure out where to put a Grot oiler on it. He might be hanging off the side back here or something. There's still a ton of stowage and just junk that has to accumulate here in the corners, because this is it's a vehicle, but the crew is essentially going to be living in or near it at all times, kind of with the way orcs operate. So it definitely needs some stowage. I certainly need more worry, like battle damage. I don't know if you can see this from here. There's a little bit of scabbing on the sides of that cowl. Like here, this is an extreme. Got all these scabs and cuts and dings an orc vehicle would get from being smashed into, onto, off of, around everything around them. And then the mech boy's not going to bother. Yeah, okay, it's a dent. That's character. It's a ding. That's good. Paint? Who cares? The sheer amount of just livable damage that an orc tank picks up. Like I said, I did completely blow up the scale. I'm okay with that. This is mostly going to be a display piece. I could run it as like a looted wagon, but never really liked the rules for a looted wagon. So it's probably going to go up there. I'm going to have to do wonders on the paint job to cover up all of my little errors and stuff. But this is the point we're at now. And next episode, it's wheels, an engine, and a gun. And I'll see you in the future.